Unique, New York.
The Oklahoma Sooners had a big week in their sweep of the Baylor Bears. Alex Storako joins the show to break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It was another big week for the Oklahoma Sooners, and Alex Storako is joining us once again to break it all down. Alex, the Oklahoma Sooners started off with a big-time win over the UT Arlington Mavericks, my alma mater, actually. Alynah Torres was fantastic in that one, and then got the 3-game sweep over the Baylor Bears. So just from the week in general, and then we can also touch on Baylor, what were some of your big takeaways from the week that was?
Yeah, I feel like a big part of this weekend was obviously the Hall of Fame show out, and it's always a big push for that weekend, just bring more fans involved, and I saw they broke the series record, so that's always super cool. But it was also a really big weekend, I think, for Alynah Torres. I mean, just the offensive power that she just showed this weekend was huge. And then I feel like this weekend brought a lot of kind of grittier games than maybe the score might show. So I think, seeing the Sooners being able to dive into, themselves and really get those bigger W's was a big thing, even though maybe just looking at the score might not show that.
I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be the next question that I asked. How important was that for Oklahoma? Because Riley Crandall threw 4, did about as good of a job as you can do, I think, battling this Oklahoma lineup. And then obviously on Friday in that 5th inning, actually each of the 2 5th innings in the first 2 games of the series, Oklahoma played at 7 runs. That's when the offensive eruption happened. But what did you just make of the Baylor series? It felt like the Bears did give Oklahoma, I don't want to say that they gave them fits. They definitely didn't necessarily do that, but they challenged Oklahoma a little bit.
Yeah, and that was something going into this series I was really kind of looking forward to. I feel like Baylor, in the first team in a while, having a little bit more of a stacked, not stacked, but just a more compound pitching staff, and that the fact that they are able to go a little bit deeper into that staff. And one of those names that, we thought we would see this season was Dari Orm, and she's not one of those, which is surprising, but I feel like that just kind of goes into the depth that the staff has. Riley Crandall was really just nails against this team. I know obviously she ended up losing, but I feel like she gave them, like you said, a little bit more of a fit than maybe expected out of just the series, especially after Baylor coming off of that 3-game sweep by Kansas. So I mean, in my own mind, I was like, oh, then maybe it shouldn't be that intense of a weekend. But for a long time, I feel like the scores were a little closer than, maybe some Sooner fans or Coach Gasso would have liked. So I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, the games were tight, and Baylor showed that they do have some really impressive pitching throughout. So how does that work? You see this Oklahoma lineup do this often, where okay, maybe you get through that first round and you're able to kind of keep them at bay a little bit. How much changes between that first at bat and that second at bat for those Oklahoma hitters?
Yeah, I feel like as a hitter, you're just adjusting to whatever you're seeing at the plate. And I feel like OU, in my mind, does the best job when it comes to it, of just taking the information that they're seeing in that moment, in that at bat, and spreading it along the dugout. I feel like a lot of teams really kind of go off of whether that's film in past games or just, tendencies of the pitcher. And I feel like OU does such an amazing job at, taking the information that they're, getting right away. And no matter the outcome, like you're going to see that passed along, whether that if they make it to first, second base, like they're passing out hand signals. I know that they have hand signals on, what they saw. And it's kind of like their own language within hitting. And I think that is, another part of it all that just makes it just so much more interesting now that you kind of can see it and watch for it. But then also okay, yeah, that's why, the Sooner softball team is just a step above. Is just the simplicity of passing along information like that not a lot of other teams, buy into. Like maybe if you do well, you pass it along, and if you don't, you're like, okay, I'm gonna leave her alone. But I feel like no matter the outcome, like the Sooners really, really love just being able to kind of learn from each other's at-bats instead of just your own at-bat. And I think that's a big part of that.
You touched on this a little bit off the top, Alex, but what a turnout it was. Obviously at Love's Field, but at Hall of Fame Stadium, where it's another record type regular season crowd. Do you like that being a part of the schedule for Oklahoma? They've got another date later there this year before you get to the postseason, the date versus Tulsa. What was your reaction to the crowd that was, and do you like that being a part of OU's schedule?
I mean, absolutely. I love that, especially as a transfer that I was last year. I'd never previously been to Hall of Fame. And so being able to, slowly amount to the crowd and just kind of that atmosphere and just like the name that it is in Hall of Fame Stadium. Even for me, we were well into the season. I was like, oh my gosh, like we're playing in Hall of Fame. It's one of those landmarks that, as a softball player, like, gosh, I wish I could grow up and play there one day. And so for OU to be able to not only bring, the transfers and the freshmen and get them adjusted, but then also being able to host different programs to have that kind of just show out for those players as well, I think is always super special and really, really cool. I know last year, obviously we played Texas, so it was a huge rivalry game. And I thought it was a great choice for Baylor this year. Just because of obviously the added drama that they caused last season. So I think that's so cool. I love that. And I think it's also a big part of, getting those newer, younger players acclimated to just that scenery and that environment. And I know it's not as much as the World Series because the added grandstands makes a world of difference. And you don't think that. You're like, oh no, it's just like, a couple of grandstands. And then you get there and you're like, oh wow, it is a lot bigger once they add those in. So I've always loved that Coach Gasso builds kind of that familiarity amongst the team. So I'm always going to be a huge advocate for that.
Yeah, and one question on Baylor before we get into the offensive explosion that Oklahoma went through and the breakout performances from several players. They're a 1-8 team right now, last place in the Big 12, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. But they started their schedule with Oklahoma State, with Kansas, with Oklahoma. Not an easy 3 teams now that we're seeing what Kansas is. They're 7-2 on the season in Big 12 play. How surprised are you at where Baylor's at? And do you think that this is at all indicative of who they are as a team? Or do you think that the breakout's coming for the Bears?
I'm not really sure. It's hard to tell. I didn't really look too in depth to their further schedule within the Big 12 and everything. And like you said, it is a shock for Baylor being 1-8 in conference, just because I feel like a lot of people had Baylor in, that run of being a regional team and possible a regional host. So I think that's the shock that it kind of brings. But going into the weekend, they had a 16-8 record, which not bad by any means. And, they beat some really good teams. They beat UCLA, Mizzou, Oregon, Lafayette twice. So when you bring in those kinds of teams that they have that resume against, it is a shock. And I just feel like they just have to put it all together. I feel like they really got the pitching going. And I feel like at this point in time, their hitting maybe is too streaky to really see that, added success kind of climbing up to, the expectations that everyone had for them this year. So maybe if they put it all together, I see it kind of exploding. Like I said, I don't know the opponents that they're facing down the road, but OU is always a hard mountain to climb. But I feel like they did really well at, just kind of attacking in different ways and kind of figuring out and just being patient, I feel like was a big part of their game plan this weekend.
Yeah, we got a lot more coming up with Alex here on Locked On Sooners. We're going to get into some of the offensive performances of the week. Alynah Torres, Tiare Jennings, Riley Boone, talk through all that. Hey, we got Alex's top 5, and we're going to debut a new segment of the show, Ask Alex, coming up later. So stick around here on Locked On Sooners.
Bracket already busted? Tired of the same old daily fantasy grind where you make a roster, you cross your fingers, and you just hope for the best? Or you're losing on the last leg of your pick'em entry? Well, introducing Bettor Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent, and you can play with your friends, not against them. You just pick more or less on real-time player strats. Strategize with your partner to boost your odds and climb that leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social DFS movement. Download Bettor Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code LOCKEDON, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Fire TV, it's your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug right into your existing TV, and it'll provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or this NCAA tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Plus, Fire TV recently created their Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us right here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date with all of the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, you name it. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust us on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV.
So let's start with the Big 12 Player of the Week, the third consecutive Big 12 Player of the Week award awarded to the Oklahoma Sooners. Alynah Torres had a big week, 4 home runs, 10 RBIs, 2 against UT Arlington in the same inning, and then 2 more against Baylor. Again, another big weekend for her. She's been in this kind of rotational role, playing, that traditional utility role, playing second base, first base, getting some third, playing in the outfield a little bit. What have you seen in her performance so far this year that has made her stand out? And just we saw this coming because what kind of player she is.
Yeah, I feel like you said, in that transitional utility player, coaches talked about, she's just been a really key power kind of input within the lineup, whether that's at second base or just getting a pinch hit when she can. But I think what has kind of led her to this weekend of power and, just that breakout moment for her was, I feel like, in those pinch hit opportunities or early game just situations, she's provided a lot of power. She's been super clutch, and I feel like not a lot of people expected that, in the sense of Avery kind of getting the starts in the beginning of the season. But when it comes to me really thinking about it, Alynah Torres, I feel like last year in our run was so clutch and very underrated in a lot of her moments, because no one really thought about her in lineup. They had to think about, the 9-hole within Riley Boone. They had to think about Jada Coleman. They had to think about Tiare and Kinzie and Brito and so many other players that I feel like no one really expects it out of her. But I feel like down the stretch, when she really bought into that, utility outfield position, she was so clutch in like the weirdest ways, and so I feel like her celebration got to the shrug on base when it came down to it. And so that's where, like, one of my iconic OU pictures is me shrugging at the World Series, and it's literally stemmed from Alynah Torres, and just the way that she was like, well, that did it, like that took care of what we needed to. And just this year, I feel like she's just so comfortable and in herself and in this team, and really just buying into, the idea of, I'll provide whatever it is whenever coach wants it. And when she's able to have that kind of comfortability and just adjustability, I think that just adds to that pop that you see when she gets those chances, because a couple of them were pinch hit opportunities. She wasn't just, in the lineup and everything. So for her to have half of her RBI count this week is just insane. I mean, she's got 20 RBIs and 10 of them came from this weekend.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, right? It was the pinch hit grand slam for Alynah. She pinch hit and came in, no big deal, hit the grand slam. What does it add for Oklahoma? You mentioned versatility. Alynah was in right field this weekend. She was at second. She was at first base. So we could talk about the bat. Of course, it's red stinking hot. But that defensive versatility that she brings to Oklahoma, how valuable is that? Because it seems like she could play just about anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere. And just, I feel like also the weirdest situations, you saw her last year, most infamously in the Oklahoma State series where, Brito had to sit out for that first game because of the heat. She didn't have that start. So Alynah Torres got the third base start. So when you see her being able to adjust in any kind of moment, whenever and whatever the circumstances, I think that just is huge and just totally vies into just that athletic positioning as an athlete. Coach has always kind of emphasized being athletic and, taking your chances and all that. And just growing up too, you hear, you shouldn't just play one position, like play it all and know it all so that, when it comes to college, like you find a way somehow onto the field by, knowing everything. And that was always taught for me and, my age group kind of growing up. And I feel like as, softball has kind of really grown, I feel like a lot of players and parents and everything want their kids specializing in either like a certain position or something along those lines. So I think it only just emphasizes the fact that, you should stay athletic and play multiple sports and play multiple positions and just being able to be willing to be flexible. And I think that's a huge part of Alynah's contribution this season.
Speaking of flexibility, the Oklahoma lineup had seen a lot of iterations throughout the early part of the season. Well, this weekend, we saw Jada Coleman batting 1, Tiare Jennings 2, and Alyssa Brito hitting 3rd. I think that's the combination most everybody expected. And it seemed like everybody was a lot more comfortable in those spots. How much does it do for a player like Jada Coleman in particular, who had been leading off basically almost her whole career at Oklahoma, and then to be kind of bounced around the lineup a little bit to settle back into quote unquote your spot?
Yeah, I think that just goes kind of into like an expectation based role. I know Jada coming off of just such an insane, season last season, there was high expectations to her for her to kind of manipulate the same kind of numbers and everything. And leading into it, that's a lot to have on your shoulders, not a lot, like, let alone just like also the streak and who you are and the energy that she has to possess. And it's almost like, I feel like Coach Gasso moving her around a little bit, let her kind of let out that steam of, okay, like this is a new year, we'll figure it out. And I think that's a big part of, why Coach is comfortable with moving all of those players around. And just the excitement of beginning of the season. Jada is such a emotional type player that she has these high emotions, just excitement and, readiness for the season that you just kind of have to let it play out. And then she'll start to really blossom when she's, really getting out of that mode. And so I feel like this is like that transitional period. You kind of seeing her get back into that rhythm, leading off, and you have Tiare, back at second. And then you have the 9-hole. I think the 3 through 8 really is a huge, guessing game for anyone, even for Coach Gasso and JT and, what they feel or analytics to that day. But I think, 1, 2, Jada, Tiare, and then the 9-hole being Boone is like the most consistent you can be. And anything else can be different besides those two. So I think that's where you see that, variability change and being able to have that while also staying consistent in their own ways.
I was glad to see our man, the SID, Mr. Thomas Breach, toss out on social media that it was a missile from Tiare Jennings to left field, because truly that home run, like it, a line drive that just kept going, a rocket off the bat of Tiare. I asked you last week, how would you describe Tiare's swing as a pitcher? You see it, so it's almost artistic, right? Well, now that Tiare's one week further along, and she's now the doubles record holder at Oklahoma. It was a historic week individually for her. how's she going to be remembered as a hitter in this game? Because she's climbing the home runs all-time list as well. She's sort of starting to knock on that door of Lauren Chamberlain of the all-time home runs. So how will Tiare be remembered as a hitter in softball?
I think a big one that a word that comes to mind is clutch. And when you think of Tiare, you think of, the 2-run double that she had on her birthday during the World Series last year. You think of those moments where, she goes on and hits the solo to win Clemson. And there's just so many moments that I think of, and you're like, gosh, like we're kind of, back to the wall. And you think of Tiare, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, you could say, you could say Kinzie, you could say Boone, you could say Jada. And I think that's what also is so special about, Oklahoma. But Tiare, to me, it's power, it's simplicity, and it's clutch. And I think those are really big things that, come to mind when thinking of Tiare in the box, because she doesn't overcomplicate things. She's a hard worker. And she really just kind of keeps it simple. And I think a lot of people forget that part of hitting because it is such a hard art of what is in the game of softball and baseball.
Yeah, she's kind of quietly having one of the best careers of all time. I don't know if we'll ever fully appreciate just what she's been able to do in her 4 years at Oklahoma, but she could potentially go down as one of the greatest of all time after big RBI seasons, hitting for a big average. Another great weekend. She went 6 for 10 with 2 home runs and 4 RBIs this past weekend against Baylor. Another one that had a big weekend, Riley Boone, who's just on a tear right now. She was 5 for 8 this weekend against Baylor, which again, just goes to show just how stacked this lineup is when your 9-hole hitter is able to hit for she's hitting 460 this year. I mean, that's incredible. Like, how does your mind get wrapped around the idea of having to face somebody who's batting 460?
I feel like before I maybe would have gotten to OU, it'd be like, okay, who are they playing? Like what's that situation, and how many at bats is she getting, and are they true hits and everything, and are they padding the stats? But then you take a full circle at OU's schedule, who they're playing, how they're getting hits, what they're producing. I think that's huge. I was just writing down numbers here not too long ago, and their team batting average as of yesterday is 394. For as a team, and you are just missing the 400 mark, I think is indescribable, because a lot of teams in the sport of softball in the history have just really exploded in having, maybe 1, maybe 2, 3 good hitters. But for a whole team to have a batting average of 394, I mean, as a singular player, you would hope that, you're hitting that. And so when you have your 9-hole hitting 460, it's like, okay, what can't she do? And so it's really so cool to just be able to witness this part of it all, because there's so many things that are so special. And I feel like a lot of people, including myself at times, taking it for granted and being like, oh, she couldn't get it done this time. And it's like, okay, come on, what are we asking for at this point? But yeah, I mean, Riley Boone just continues to amaze me. And she's another one I feel like who does it quietly, but with the best celebrations.
Yeah, absolutely. She's goated as far as the celebrations go. Every home run trot, you love to watch the Riley Boone dance off there at the end of when the batter gets to home plate. I want to ask you about the other Riley coming up after the break, just what it means to transition to a new catcher and what she's kind of doing offensively. Again, it's pretty quiet, but she's having a good season herself. I will come up and we'll do that next here on Locked On Sooners. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The North Carolina Tar Heels can only be described as an armada. This one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they secured a spot in the Sweet 16 this Thursday against the Alabama Crimson Tide in the NCAA tournament. They're a favorite picked by many to make a run for the national title. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Passion, drive, performance, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what brings your ride or die and keeps it alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we talked about Booney. Let's talk about Riley Ludlam because, okay, she only had one hit over the weekend against Baylor, but she had a dozen walks. Just absolutely insane. Just seeing the ball so well. But behind the plate, also doing really well. What does it do for a pitcher? Okay, Kinzie Hansen's the starting catcher. She caught the majority, if not all, of the innings leading up to her injury. Now you have to transition as a pitcher to working with a new catcher. What does that transition look like as a pitcher?
The transition can be hard at times. And I think especially in this situation, you have kind of come into the program, you've gone through the fall and you're starting the spring, and, you know, Kinzie's that catcher that you're like, okay, there's no really rotation. Like, this is who I'm comfortable with. And you develop just like that second language in a way of, you know, how you guys communicate on and off the field. And, she's just so good at, you know, adapting to each pitcher in their own way that it truly makes her, you know, a one-of-a-kind kind of catcher. And that just goes into that transition being kind of hard in a way of, you know, Riley Ludlam has not had, you know, just that type of game experience at OU with these pitchers. But I think she's done it with such grace in that transition. I mean, she's done, you know, so well. And for her to just really step up to the plate, quite literally, of wanting to soak in all the information. I've heard nothing but just such high praise when it comes to, you know, me asking the girls of, you know, how she's doing in the transition. And she is just have always wanted to be just that sponge. And, you know, as a catcher, I think that's amazing. But as someone too, who maybe not expected to get this amount of time in this kind of way in, you know, starting conference in this role, I think is huge, because you kind of take that humility and be able to kind of wear it. And then you have Kinzie Hansen, who's right there along your side, willing to help you. And that's one thing, but then for you to like be accepting of that kind of help is another huge role of that, and super important. And, you know, I'm really excited for Lud to just get this kind of, you know, experience and be able to really just soak it all in an experience way and not just an information way. And, you know, getting to have that start in Hall of Fame is, I think, something that she'll probably remember for a really long time. And just seeing her have that kind of success here has been really, really cool. And I mean, I can go on about, you know, her offensively help too to the team, and just her pinch hit abilities, and just her poise and in a way, and the amount of walks that she's providing. I mean, she's just totally buying into everything defensively, offensively. And when you are able to find that kind of, you know, product within a graduate transfer, it is, I mean, unreal when you think about it. And it's not someone, you know, that's stuck in their ways and, you know, not willing to learn, and having that coachability, I think, just goes to show just how awesome of a player in person Riley Ludlam is.
So we've got your top 5 right around the corner, and then the people want to ask you a couple of questions before we get out of here. I wanted to ask you about 2 individual moments before we jump to that, Alex. The walk-off grand slam for Ella Parker. What did you think of that? And then also, if we're talking about catchers, how about K9? The pinch hit at bat didn't wind up netting the home run or the double or the single that everybody wanted, but that was a pretty awesome individual ovation for K9 out there. So what did you think of those 2 moments from the weekend that was?
Yeah, Ella Parker, I feel like she just continues to amaze me as well. And just that freshman ability of being able to kind of really up her game in a lot of ways. And, coming into it, she's a DH, and it can be hard to, really continue your focus throughout a game or a season and just stay locked in. And I feel like she really has showed that thus far within the season, and continues to rack in, the RBIs and keep consistently swinging at her pitches. And just to see her maturity has been really cool to follow as well. So honestly, wasn't surprised by the big moment. I feel like she's just gotten used to it in such a short time. So it's been really cool to see that. And then just the ovation that, Kinzie got at the plate. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, did I miss something? Like, what's the big deal? But I do know that, Sunday was supposed to be her senior day. And so I feel like that was a nod to her in that way. But then also I feel like the fans were just so excited to see her, doing something softball wise. And even after coach was like, you guys don't need to worry, I feel like a lot of Sooner fans were worrying. And I feel like that also led into the ovation, but just a super cool moment. And, someone that's so deserving of it. So really two cool opportunities for the both of them.
Yeah, it seems like every weekend at Love's Field, there's something cool that goes down. So it's good planning by the Oklahoma communications staff to get something for the fans to get excited about. Let's get into your top five, Alex. There's the top five, and really several others are starting to distance themselves from the rest of the pack. Obviously, we've got the Oklahoma Sooners coming in at number 1, Texas at number 2, Georgia at number 3, Duke at number 4, and Stanford at number 5. Alex, just talk real quickly about, which of these teams has stood out to you the most this season, and maybe you think will have the biggest shot to get to, that championship series aside from Oklahoma?
I mean, aside from Oklahoma, I think Texas, as much as we hate them, they've put together just a really good team this year, and they're providing that, not only just showing that in the game, but then also with their numbers as well. And I feel like another one that's kind of maybe unexpected is Duke. I think I'm a big favor of Duke, just kind of having that really good year, and they're providing just a lot of really good numbers behind, their play. Duke's 26-3. Something that's kind of unexpected. Their team batting average is a 338, and their team ERA is 1.12. They're doing better than, OU's pitching staff, who has a 1.39. Obviously, both are, admirable. But I think that's a really big part of, Duke's game. They're also scoring a ton of runs too. And so when you put 2 and 2 together and have both of those abilities, I think that's huge. Texas is, right up there with a team ERA with 1.26. They're hitting a team 391. They're 28-3. They've dropped a couple just surprising ones in a lot of ways. But they're scoring those runs, and they have, Reese Atwood, who has just had a stellar season so far. I mean, when you have your numbers comparing to Tiare Jennings, I think that, definitely serves as a intense, awesome, just deliverable of a season. And so I'm excited for her in that way, because I know she's younger. I think Duke has had some surprising numbers, and just the fact I feel like their pitching is carrying them, but they're getting the job done. Their offense is, not as, big and powerful as these other teams that I've talked about, but I think they're another one. And, a 6, maybe 5 for me would be Tennessee in that way. And I feel like a lot of those are common schools that we're seeing. And Georgia is another one up there. I mean, they went undefeated for a while. They're my number 3, and a lot of other, media sites for softball, they have them up there as well. And they're just another team that's getting it done equally on both sides. And so there's not one that's, higher than the other. And I feel like that's what's given them that consistency. Even if they're, giving up maybe a run or 2 more, or not hitting as well, they're still getting it done no matter what. And I feel like they're really possessing a big grittiness part of the season that you don't see from a lot of other teams. I mean, I feel like a lot of other teams are getting it done because they have the talent. I feel like Georgia has just been gritty and just being able to kind of be scrappy and put it all together in the right way to get those kinds of W's. They just missed sweeping Alabama for an SEC series, and being in the SEC is going to help you compact everything for later in the season. And so I think that also just goes to a testament of Oklahoma, Texas, and Duke not being the SEC and still providing a schedule and intensity that prepares them for a postseason run in the long run.
Let's just ask the one question from the audience this week, John. We'll save the others for later, but DL wants to know, and by the way, you've got, a professional career underway, and probably you could play for a long, long time if you want to, but DL wants to know, down the road, do you see yourself coaching in the future?
I think it's a possibility down the road, but you never know what happens. And so, I'm just fortunate in being able to play for, after college. And so I'm super thankful about that. But I know it's something I can always lean on down the road if need be. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to be intrigued to follow your professional career with the Oklahoma City Spark this summer. Several big time exhibitions that are going to be happening, as well as just your regular schedule. At some point, we're going to have to dig into that whenever the season gets a little bit closer for you all. You'll have to preview the WPF for us coming up this season without, saying too much about those folks down in Austin. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. If you submitted a question, we're going to get to that question. We just ran out of time this week, so we will get to some of those questions next week as well. Make sure you're following Alex on Twitter at Alex Storako. Go check out her merch store, alexstorako.com. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh, she's Alex, I'm John. Boomer Sooner.